Okay, I want to welcome everyone here tonight. My name is Suzanne Wagstaff, and I work for the Alumni Association at Washington University. And my colleague Berkeley Gillentine, who also works with me in advancement. We traveled here a few days ago, but we're in town from St. Louis. Everyone always asks that. So I just want to welcome everybody. I want to thank Ewan Wave for letting us use this beautiful space. I think we're talking about some of the topics tonight. I would work here and in this beautiful space.
If you're interested in the job, let me know.
I would like to, this event was put together by the Career and Networking Committee, and that's a subcommittee of the San Francisco Regional Cabinet. And we have, does anyone on the committee want to stand up? We have Josh and Ewan, who are the co-chairs of that. We have Shane, who's here. Shane came up with the networking bingo, which I think is a great idea. And remember, we got some prizes after this evening. Did I miss anyone else on the committee? So I want to thank them for putting this together. Before we get started, I'm going to turn it over to the panel, but I want to let you all know we are excited to start doing a lot more events here in the Bay Area. Absolutely, as much as we can get in here, we will do events here. This is terrific. But one thing that's coming up, we have an entrepreneur summit, which will be held on Saturday, June 18th. And that is going to be at Menlo Atherton High School. And we will be inviting you all. We're going to be having such topics as cybersecurity for national security. We're going to have some design entrepreneurial talk, some legal issues talk for entrepreneurs. What am I forgetting? We're going to have a talk about hiring and building teams during the Great Resignation. So there's going to be some great things. We'll have lunch and a lot of networking. So watch for that invitation. And if anyone isn't receiving invitations, come talk to me tonight, or if you want to get involved more. Some other events coming up. We're going to be planning an event this summer with the, pardon me if I'm not pronouncing this correctly, but the GloPay exhibition, which is at the Legion of Honor. I saw it yesterday. I'm not a big couture fan, but it was amazing. So we'll be having some docent tours and breakfast sometime this summer. And then also we're going to do a tour to Angel Island. We have an alum who is the executive director at the Angel Island Immigration Station and Foundation. So watch for that. And I think that that's it. This is going to be casual. Get up, help yourself to more things. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the panel.
Great.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Josh Steinfeld. I work on product strategy for Carta, and I have the honor of moderating this panel here today, who knows far more about tonight's topic than I do. So I'm excited to ask them a bunch of questions. And I'm excited for you all to ask them a bunch of questions. So given they are amazing, I will not introduce them. I will let them introduce themselves. So we'll start with Julia.
Great, thank you. My name is Julia Lee. I'm the Director of Inclusion and Belonging at the Asian Art Museum. Before that, I ran a nonprofit in St. Louis called Create Space for artists. I'm also an entrepreneur, so I own 6 restaurants with my mother in St. Louis. It's a very interesting landscape right now for the future of work, and I'm excited to be here today.
Great.
Hi, everybody. I'm Erin Finley. I am an HR business partner. It's kind of the external name, but internally we call it people consultant manager. I've been at Google for 8 years, and I'm really excited to talk about this topic. I'd say some of my background is I was talking to a couple folks about industrial organizational psychology, which is essentially the study of people at work. So I love what I do. I'm actually passionate about it every day. And so I'm really excited to talk to you all about it.
Hi, I'm Sarah Anderson. I am head of real estate and workplace effectiveness at Genentech. I went to grad school, WashU, to get my master's of architecture. But I now describe myself as a recovered architect and deeply involved in the return to campus, return to office conversation. I feel like I'm doing a panel similar to this kind of every week, virtually or in real life. It's really fun and we're learning a ton. And I'm no insult to any of my co-panelists, but I think it's really good to acknowledge that we're at an inflection point in what work looks like. And none of us really know what's coming next. So if you find yourself listening to a panel or somebody's like, here's what's gonna happen, they're full of it. So it's a really interesting time to be in this industry. And I frankly feel like for those of us who wanted to unshackle workers from workplace, this is a gift.
Yeah, for sure. Great. So I have a whole list of things that I want to talk about, but we also wanted to know if there's anything in particular that you all are interested in hearing about. So if there are any topics or questions you have, we'll have a Q&A at the end and you can just jump in with questions as we go. But if there are any topics you want us to hit on, yell them out or think about it. All right, we'll just go. And if you get inspired,
Josh was gonna make it a bespoke presentation just for you.
handcrafted. So, I mean, there's a million different approaches to this, right? You feel like, you talk to your friends and every one of your friends has like a different thing that they're doing. So like, how many people here are in the office 5 days a week? Yeah. Like volunteer, like, like that's your policy, it's 5 days a week. And then how many are in like 2 days a week? Yeah, it's like, I mean, it's just like everywhere. So yeah, and how many people are not going to the office anymore? Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm 2 days a week, which for me is like right. So I guess, we've got, 3 different organizations represented here. So I'd love to just hear sort of like, just kind of a brief overview of, how you've approached return to office and sort of like where you are right now in terms of people in the office, people remote, like what's sort of just like the general policy right now. Start with Sarah. Start it over here.
So if you're not familiar with Genentech, we actually were the first biotech company. We're based in South San Francisco, been around for 40 some odd years. We are now actually wholly owned by Roche. But we are also the only fully integrated site within the Roche network, which means we do everything from molecular discovery, so R&D, to making drugs on our site. As you can imagine, you cannot do experiments, chemistry experiments, biology experiments in your kitchen, your garage. You can't make drugs there either. So,
I mean, you could.
Yeah.
Not the kind of drugs that you're right. Yeah.
but not the kind of drugs the FDA likes to approve.
Right.
Not the kind of drugs that cure cancer.
Right.
So we have had people on, some people never left. Our manufacturing teams never left. And then we had to bring R&D back. If you imagine a drug discovery company, like you exist to drug the undruggable, to treat the untreatable. So as to shut down our discovery pipeline in 2020 was a kind of a kick in the gut. So we brought them back as quickly as possible. So we had basically anywhere from 1,500 in the beginning to about 5,000 people coming to campus on a cadence because they're in that world. And then voluntarily, people started coming back May of 2021 and then broad return. And we were, because we did mandate vaccines and the word mandate and Genentech do not go well together. But we felt like we are healthcare, we need to do this. So we basically said, listen, if you are assigned to the South San Francisco campus, we have welcome back week and we expect you to show up at least once the week of March 21st. And if you need more time to get your life together, by April 4th. And the majority of people did. And people are coming back at will. And actually we have agreements. So we can talk more about that later, but we're a little bit different in that we have a lot of place-based work.
Mhm. And I think, Aaron, I think Google's a little similar to that, where, there are hardware engineers and sort of other people where they couldn't really be doing stuff at home.
Correct, absolutely. When you hopefully turn to Google Photos or Gmail.
Yes. We are Google Suite.
You need that, your data to show up, right? You need your photos to show up. So a data center can't just stop, right? So we're thinking globally here. We have data centers everywhere. We have hardware engineers everywhere. We absolutely couldn't just fully say, oh, well. And when we think about kind of a broader workforce in true Google fashion, we aren't forcing anything. So googly, everything for everybody. So we have options. You can go fully, well, let's start with the easiest one. You can return to office. You can choose to return to office, and right now you can opt in to doing 5 days a week, but the bare minimum is 3 days a week. And then that's the middle. So now we have our two extremes, right? You can apply to be remote, full-time remote. The approval process is based on your specific business line. So again, if you are about to launch the next line of Pixel phones that we just announced in October, you probably need to come in the office and keep tinkering so that that phone can launch successfully. However, if you are doing maybe sourcing, which can be done from anywhere, perhaps that is something that your business can support being done remotely. So we've got all the way in. Yeah,
And leading
exactly.
with the
We're
work.
absolutely leading with the work. So we've got full-time in the office, full-time remote, and folks, well, I guess I'd say our hybrid is the 3 days in, 3 days, 3 days in, 2 days out. I think that pretty much covers it, yeah. And we are slowly bringing folks back in. We have like a level system to determine kind of the safety of the area, the safety of bringing folks back in. So we're only asking people to come in once their office has reached a specific level. And even then your business kind of has some determination on if we're really pushing that. So my business in particular isn't necessarily like pushing it, like get in here tomorrow. It's like try it out, get in, get your feet wet, get comfortable, determine your commute, figure out how to get your childcare or whatever kind of situation you may personally have in order so that we can slowly get there. And one thing I failed to mention is that the 3 days are determined by your business unit. So could be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, could be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. It completely depends on what your particular business hierarchy has decided in order to optimize the most personal interaction or collaboration during that in-office time.
Great. And then a museum is very different from a big tech company or a big biotech company. So how did you all think about this?
Yes, so I think I appreciate just, the variety in industries that we are all representing. The Asian Art Museum is a museum, and we're also both a foundation and a part of the city. So we have employees that are foundation-based and also employees that are city-based. That doesn't mean we're not all very cohesive, but that does mean there are some differences when it comes to and then the roles, similarly, those we have had folks that have never left the museum or left the office. And for example, security, we need a lot of that in San Francisco. And things have changed even the past few years when it comes to security and conservation, those who touch and look at each piece and can make sure that, we have 10,000 pieces. All of those are really due to our conservation team that keeps them so thriving. And our artists and those who are setting up our exhibitions and etc. So we do have staff that has always been present, but we do have plenty of roles that you don't need to come in every day. And I would say a lot of our team comes in 2 days a week. And at some point it was, I believe, a policy that we come in 2 days to keep each other safe, as well as make sure that we have some interaction time. So for some, it is currently still hybrid. And most of us come, a good amount of us come in 2 days a week. But certain departments such as conservation, security, facilities, etc., they've been coming in all along. And I think it's important to appreciate that when we welcome folks back to the office and use language that is expressing gratitude.
Yeah.
Rather than just saying, hey, like we're back now in a hybrid model, where those folks have been there all along. So
Yeah, I think that would,
Very
you know,
well said.
I think there was a lot of talk sort of, you know, as we were getting closer to being back in offices, where some people were calling it, you know, return to work, which is not true. Like,
Because none of us really were working. in
everyone's
2020.
been working, so, you
It
know,
made me crazy.
I know.
And some really smart people were doing it. And I'd
Yeah.
be like emailing them, it's like, just so you know, we should call it return to office.
yeah, exactly. So, you know, I think given, you know, given where your focus is, Julia, thinking about this through sort of like a DEI lens, you know, how do you think about, you know, people are coming back, a lot of this is sort of like left to individuals. How do you make sure that sort of like where you end up is happening in sort of an equitable way and in a way where, you know, we're not sort of like advantaging or disadvantaging folks based on like what they've chosen or what sort of like our overall model is?
yeah, so, you know, and this is, again, I'm not speaking necessarily from the Asian Art Museum's perspective, but what I think about, you know, equitable practices, it's allowing employees and individuals to empower themselves for the model that works for them. And that could be going to the office, that could be working from home, that could be in a hybrid model, and empowering people to choose that within their organization and having policies that empower that rather than limit that. And everyone understanding that we're all human beings and we are all different, and everyone's preference will be different than other people's. So, you know, in I think an organization, a company, a foundation, institution that's really thriving for or reaching for equity, it's, I believe, around personal choice and empowering that and
Mhm.
making sure that there's legal and HR practices that resonate that.
Totally. And, you know, Erin, you're sort of in the middle of all that as an HR, as an HR business partner.
Very much so.
So what, you know, what have been some of the challenges from your perspective as Google has implemented this and people have been coming back and sort of like living the policy, like where are the biggest challenges right now?
I'll go first with like a challenge that we've had and one that we're about to face. So a challenge that we've had, and this is rare, there have been plenty. Just one. Compensation.
Yep. Yes.
That's what I used to do.
Light up. I hope you comment on this. So it's really interesting because we've had, obviously our talent has, a lot of talent has left the Bay Area. A lot of talent has realized that there are other markets they've always wanted to live in or have explored in this period and they want to settle down in. And that's all very wonderful. And there have been, I promise. There have been people who have had the expectation that when they leave, their compensation should remain in the Bay Area
Yep.
stratosphere.
Hasn't
Right.
changed, Erin.
It-
Why
Yeah.
Exactly. Oh my gosh.
Exactly.
Yes. And I empathize so deeply. I would love to live on all the land. If I could essentially own all of the land of San Francisco in a random place and get my Google, I'd love it, but somewhere else, obviously. And I think it's, again, speaking for Erin, not for Google, that would be so deeply irresponsible. We'd essentially create San Franciscos everywhere where people would be taking all of their income and destroying markets, which we're seeing happen slightly anyway,
Yes.
but at least Google isn't necessarily contributing as much to that, but it's deeply irresponsible to do so. So people have said like, oh, I'll leave and just get my Google salary elsewhere, which is absolutely possible. It's their decision, but we've of course lost talent over that. It has been absolutely a challenge to try to come up with other drivers to retain talent outside of compensation, because that is a big one. Of course, you want to take care of your family. People have so many financial obligations, be it themselves, their immediate families, sending money to broader family. There's a lot of things to consider. So it's deeply personal, but it has absolutely been a challenge. And for some people, their values no longer align with Google's, and that just happens. And so it's expensive to lose talent. So a challenge, I'd say, is compensation, but the kind of higher, the rainbow over that is retention.
Yeah.
Great resignation. I know everyone is feeling it in some way, shape, or form. A challenge moving forward, and this is totally going to build off of you, friend, is what I expect to be like the buzzwords of 2022, collaboration equity, right? So people are going to be coming online in so many different ways. And we want to make sure that people can collaborate in a way that everyone is able to express themselves, despite your level, your tenure, your location, your device preference. How do we make sure that the person on the phone can have the same interaction as the person in the conference room, who can have the same interaction as the person who's, you know, living it up on a beach and having the best time, but like has their headphones in.
I want to dig in on this.
I was
now.
gonna say, I'd love to hear about collaboration from Sarah's.
Well, what I
point of
want to
view.
dig in on is, there's a choice here. So there is an innate inequity when you have a meeting of 8 people and 4 are in the room and 4 are not. Because when we're settling in the room, we're chit-chatting, and those who are remote can't really hear us. And then when the meeting ends, we're having another little conversation and they're not part of it. And I don't know how to stop that. Right now I'm in a place like, I'm just going to accept that there is an inequity. And where does personal choice come into this? So I have chosen to be full-time remote. And frankly, I'm calling in from Bali, whatever hour it is, and I'm taking this meeting from the beach. I don't have the best view of the room from my phone. But you know what? I'm on the beach in Bali. So I feel like we have to acknowledge that I believe in the intention of collaboration equity. And I think we all want it, but I think there's also certain constraints around it that until we have avatars or something, you know what I mean? Like, you're Google.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I completely agree. And it's like a giant yes and. I see it in 2 worlds where there's the in meeting experience and then there's the out of meeting experience. So in meeting,
Yes.
right. So in meeting, there should be collaboration equity, right? There should be a world where just because I'm in the room, I should still be able to have some form of interaction in which it feels equitable to others in random spaces, be it we're all the same size on the massive, on the massive screen, or you know, there's we're piloting ways in which one of the things we did in the Google Workspaces, you can give live emoticons
During Google
during
Hangouts.
Google
Yep.
Hangouts. So fun, like all the hearts, like haha, so funny, crap, I hate that.
I don't.
Touche. There's definitely a skew. Sometimes like heart.
Yeah.
Oh my god, I love it so much. Yes, I
Remember, I used to be on the comp team. I would give presentations about compensation. We would not get the flow.
all the crabs.
Yeah, not always a positive experience.
Touche. But we're trying to figure out ways in which if you're in the room and you're not active in your computer, you can still see those things. You can also emote. You can also right, and that's a very easy example. But like there are plenty of other ways we're trying to figure out ways in which in meeting, yes, but I agree, out of meeting, that those are their choices, and that person in Bali is going to have to figure out, how do I now network? How do I put myself out there potentially more or not?
And in fields where anecdotal, so I know there's other people here who are architects. Architecture is called the practice of architecture because you have to practice it. And coming up in the field of architecture, you work in a room full of other architects and you listen. And there's all this, I called it anecdotal learning, but you learn by listening, you learn by proximity. And how do we accommodate that and personal choice. So I think that we're just gonna be faced with all these challenges that we need to figure out.
Mhm.
We need to figure out because we do want things to be equitable. And I believe that part of the solution is intentionality. That mentorship and coaching young people who are young in career has to be much more intentional now. And both parties have to be intentional about it because otherwise it's not going to happen because you're not bumping into each other, you're not seeing each other.
Yeah, I mean, I think that raises a good point. It's how do you think about this for a new hire? And not just someone who's early in career, but someone who's just new to your company. I mean, I switched jobs during this whole thing, so I onboarded virtually, which is weird. It's just like, I'm working in the same place, but now I have a different laptop, and when I open it up, there are different faces on it. It's like, oh, now I have a new job. But, you know, I think there's something missing when you're new to a company and you're not sort of physically with people to meet them outside the context of a meeting.
Yeah.
So is there thinking going on in terms of that? So, you know, just outside of just the policy, like, are we thinking about new hires in a way where, okay, is there something we can be doing for them to improve the onboarding process and sort of, you know, getting them, you know, ramped up faster? I don't know.
Are we
Question.
assuming the new hires are full-time remote? Like, I
Yeah.
hired, I mean, we've hired people, obviously, but even on my team, we had 2 people join our team in the last 3 months. And one, his first day was literally the day our first like broad return to campus day. And now, since the pandemic, you get your laptop and you'll get your laptop by noon on the Monday of your start day. And then at 1 PM, you log online for online onboarding. Well, he got his laptop early and he lives in Cupertino. He drove up to South San Francisco so he could do that virtual meeting from the building where we were,
Right.
because he wanted to meet us and because he never met us.
Yeah.
But so it's just, and then there's somebody else who we hired who started a couple weeks ago, somebody I had hired at a previous firm, so I know personally. She got her laptop, she stood at home, she did her online onboarding, she came, she's like, when's a good day for me to come in to be with people, so we can be, you know. And so it's their personal styles were able to be accommodated, but they were intentional about it.
Mhm. Yeah. What are some ways you're thinking about maintaining or sort of enhancing connections between, given that, like, you know, some people are remote, some people are in a couple days a week, you know, it's sort of like all over the place. But how do you make sure that people are connecting and we have cohesive teams?
I can start with this one. I think what's going to be even more important, and not that it was ever not important, was affinity groups and employee resource groups and making sure that there's mentorship across teams and levels, et cetera. So, you know, in my, and I think it's even more important now that we're hybrid, or, you know, in these various models. I think when you have the social interactions that are not necessarily connected to your department or team, it really gives room for learning and development. And what you were mentioning before around coaching, a lot of that does happen within these, you know, perhaps affinity groups or clubs or et cetera. So more budget and intentionality around those. And even though sometimes it can be like, oh, that's an extra tacked on like people programs thing. Well, it's actually so important for people to connect and for people to feel like they belong somewhere outside of just, you know, OKRs and department meetings.
Yeah.
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes.
Absolutely.
Plus one to everything you said.
I agree. I
By the
think,
way, I say stuff like that out loud. No, I'm sorry. I also do this, and I never did this before.
Oh,
This
yeah.
So, you know, so my wife's a dance teacher, and so she's taught over Zoom this whole time. And and she teaches theater too. So one thing she does is, like, you know, to check in on her kids if they get it or not. They say, like, okay, give me a thumpature. Thumpature up, like, got it, thumpature down, like, I don't get
oh,
it.
that's
So
fantastic.
I have adopted thumpature.
We're gonna adopt that one too.
Yeah, you use it, use it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
love it. The only thing I'd add is that I expect, I mean, some budgets will go down, but probably travel expense to go up, right? Like we just fundamentally have to bring people together.
Right.
Because they're going to be from all over and you just have to have on sites, off sites, whatever you want to call it. We just have to physically bring people together sometimes. So I think there are probably some teams that traditionally never had to do that, right? Or never did it, never were budgeted for it. And it just has to change.
Yeah, I think we're all sick of virtual escape rooms, so.
Yes.
Totally agree.
Absolutely.
Sarah, how are you thinking about this? Especially, I'm sure you are, pretty involved in even just thinking through like physical space issues.
Yes. Yeah.
So, how do you think about this in terms, not just bringing people together, but just like collaboration in the physical sense? Like it feels like we've gotten away from sort of, everyone's sitting at their desk and like, that's how you work.
Yes, and we actually, for what it's worth, we already had flexible working for part of our population that could pre-pandemic. And now with our future of working, we've tried to bring some level of flexibility to every role. So if you are a research scientist that would leave the lab and come outside and do your write-ups at the desk, now you've got the flexibility to go home and do that. And then we've created like midday bus routes and stuff like that to support that. But so what, when you come to campus, what are you doing? And I think it's kind of falling into me and we. So that if there's a we as a team agree, we're going to come together on Tuesday and we're going to have our team meeting in the morning and everybody has other stuff. And then in the afternoon, we're going to have a brainstorming session and then we're going to have beers or whatever it is. And we are going to be intentional about our time together. But then the me time, why do I actually go to the office if I don't have a team meeting? And this is an interesting thing because I feel like this is, not Genentech's opinion, wholly mine. I feel like going to the office now is kind of like a leap of faith. Sort of like having kids. If you look at having kids empirically, you'd never do it. All the reasons not to have them are so much more compelling than seriously, than like it's a heart thing, like you have to do it. Berkeley's with me
Thank you,
on this.
Berkeley.
But when you do it, and so I've been going back a couple days a week since May of 21. And every single time I go to campus, I have an interaction or I have an experience that I would not be able to have otherwise. I will see somebody I haven't seen. Something I talk about is the COVID squeal. People who have not seen each other in real life for 2 years. It's like, oh my God, we're at it. And you can hear it, and you hear this noise. You're like, I know exactly what's happening. Those two people connecting. And what I realized as more people came to campus, and I shamelessly eavesdropped as I walked around, was that we had forgotten what that felt like. So we got so used to working from home, like, yeah, I'm super productive. I'm getting everything done. I'm seeing all this stuff. I'm good. And there's a theory, a philosophy around weak ties and strong ties, that during the pandemic, our strong ties, people we work with all the time, they got stronger. But our weak ties, the people we bump into in the lunch line or at the coffee shop or whatever it is, we don't see them anymore because there's no reason to see them unless you're intentional about it. And there's a hypothesis that the weak ties are where innovation comes from. So when I was on campus, I was having like the weak ties, or even somebody who I was seeing all the time. She's like, oh my God, I was about to write you an email because I need to know X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, oh, here's the answer, A, B, C. And she's like, well, what about this? What about, I'm like, and we solved something that would have taken 12 emails in 5 minutes. So for me, who has an admitted in-person bias, I'm in charge of 207 acres and 5 million square feet in South San Francisco. Kind of want people to go there. But I also am an extrovert and I love people. So I'm super happy with adjusting from pre-pandemic, 2 days working from home, now 3 days working from home. That's good, works for me. But I also live close enough to campus to bike in 45 minutes. So I also admit that my commute is, So when people come, what are they doing? They are doing both and outside of the R&D and manufacturing. So the office, which is where many of us, Expensify and others are. there's a mix. There is still heads down work occurring. Some need to do it in an enclosed room. There's quiet. Some can do it in a place that has a level of buzz like a cafe. And then there's team activity. And so a wildly unpopular decision that I've made is I'm not gonna invest capital in anything right now. We're gonna watch.
Yeah.
And we've got sensors, we've got badge data, we've got surveys, we're gonna listen, we're gonna watch, and we're gonna listen, and we're gonna learn. And we've only really started having more people back since end of March. It takes 3 months, it takes 90 days for new behaviors to develop. Coming back to the office, whatever the cadence is a new behavior. It took me 8 times before I remembered everything, my mask, my COVID test, my water bottle, my badge. It's a new behavior that we have to get back in, but the big learning was we have forgotten how good it feels to reconnect with somebody in person.
Mhm.
And until we try that a couple times, we owe it to ourselves as humans. We need to reweave the social fabric.
Yeah, so that was gonna be my next question. So now that we're 6-7 weeks into, I think, most people's return to office, like what's kind of been the biggest like aha moment, or like what's been the biggest like surprise of how this has all been playing out so far?
I would say, I'm not sure if this is a surprise or just an observation that I'm excited about. So for example, I went to business school at Haas, and I felt like perhaps I shouldn't have gone to business school.
Mhm.
And it had something to do with really loud people. And
Sorry.
sorry. And I am personally an extrovert, but I married an introvert. And I so deeply respect how he operates, which is so different than the way I operate. And though this shouldn't be surprising, but it did kind of take me aback. I'm like, interesting. This is, fascinating. Is I think that in this hybrid remote future of work, introverts and all sorts of different personalities have a chance to perhaps get promoted in a different level, or perhaps their way of working is appreciated or are thought of. And for example, my husband, who is not the most social bird, he really thrived during the time in which he could concentrate and not have to feel anxiety around certain things. So not a surprise per se, but an interesting observation that I think in the future of work, we are going to have an acceptance of different working modes and an appreciation for people who perhaps, the old model of MBA successors wasn't great for them anyways.
Mhm.
So perhaps we'll see like a new era of new leadership that's just a bit different.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like surprise. I feel like there was so much anticipation and so much analysis. I was like, this could happen. This could happen.
Or scenario development.
Oh my gosh, right? So like at this particular junction, I feel like everything is kind of falling into like, okay, yeah. And now the question is, where does it all
Mhm.
converge or diverge here in the near future? So I'm trying to think of like the surprise. I think it's been interesting to see. I think there was a lot of buzz while we were all at home around people reshuffling and going all over the country, the world.
Mhm.
I'd say probably the one thing that started to become a surprise is how much people actually do want to be in. I'm almost wondering if there's like a silent majority in a sense that actually was just like, actually we were cool with this the whole time. We just were waiting for y'all to decide when we can come back. So I'm intrigued to see how that kind of plays out. Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, it's nice to have someone else make your lunch. So.
Amen.
Oh. I have to share this. We had a broad return to campus Q&A session. And what happens, I've learned during this time, when you have these things, we have poll everywhere. So basically people can submit their questions ahead of time. And when they submit the questions ahead of time, then the comms team is furiously working. I'm like, okay, Sarah, you're going to take this question. I've scripted this up. Please feel free to add in, whatever. And so this one question comes in, which is less than a question, more of a comment, which is, all right, so you expect me to get up, put on real pants, drive into work, burning fossil fuels, use my time that I would normally be using to exercise, come to the office, pay for my lunch. Yeah, I'm not interested. And they said, Sarah, we want you to take this one. I'm like, yeah, you know what I was like, and we don't want you. Neither are we. And it turned, people relations, a subset of the HR organization, found out who this was. And it was a contractor and they were terminated for conduct unbecoming.
Wow.
If you're gonna be that vocal about not wanting, like, there was no sort of like, here's the big question I think that a lot of us are dodging. Why? So people are saying, come back to the office. And my Genentech executive committee is saying, why aren't more people showing up? I'm like, because we haven't told them why. Why do they need to be here? And even if we say it's an intangible, we need you to show up a little bit to feel it yourself. Or we say, we believe that some of our innovation and discovery happens best in person. We want to try that. We expect you to come back. Give a why. Or say, we don't know why, but we're trying something out here. We'd like you to trust us and try this to the end of 2022. I don't have the right answer here, but we need more of a why. I'm head of real estate. So I've got 5 million square feet. The why is not to come back to utilize the real estate. I can tell you that right now. That is not the why. The why is more nuanced. It is about the work. And I feel very privileged that I work for a company that's saving lives. We need to bring 3 to 5 times more patient benefit at half the cost of society. That's what we have to do. And we believe that we are falling behind in that effort because we're not coming together enough. So specifically product development, we're asking you to try to come in a couple days a week through the end, whatever your agreements are, I don't care, but like leaders need to articulate the why.
Why don't we take some questions? I've been asking enough questions. So I'd love to hear, yeah, John.
Yeah, a question on diversity, equity, and inclusion, but also I was considered an essential employee, and the group that I work with, we're all considered essential employees that had to report to campus on a daily basis. We had situations where we had single parents that had kids and the schools were not letting students in, so they had to care for their kids at the same time report to campus, and it was very difficult for them. So retaining those employees was very difficult. So I was wondering what you think about how to approach situations like that in this environment.
Yeah, I think unfortunately in our country, there's a lot to be said about women's rights and or caretakers' rights and et cetera. The frank, honest answer is we don't have the fundamentals in this country from a political standpoint. So it is up to each institution or each company to address that. And I will say most companies and institutions are not equipped to handle those. And I do know that there are companies and institutions that have certain resources, such as a childcare stipend or budget or et cetera, and some places that even have daycares and et cetera. But I think, you know, and this is perhaps a bigger conversation than this moment right now, but we don't actually support women at work in this country, or, you know, anybody, you know. And I think it's a little, it's a bit unfair, but the stance that companies have to take to address these when there's not these frameworks that our government has. And yes, it is absolutely at a cost to the institution or the company, but we have to have these conversations. And the reality is a lot of well, not a lot, but some companies and institutions frankly won't have that budget. However, there are paths. You can see a lot of places are unionizing. There are paths to make the workplace better. There's, if you advocate and there's possibility for anything, especially in the workplaces that I feel a lot of us are in. We are, acknowledging the fact that I believe everyone in this room is likely at a privileged state. And that, the companies in which we are part of perhaps could accommodate. But knowing that they don't have to do anything. It's not our country doesn't have those frameworks yet, but we can speak up. Certain companies can unionize. And also sometimes we just actually don't know what resources we have. For example, the organization I was at before had a childcare budget and had a stipend, but people didn't know. So ask questions and push for that, and know that it may not actually work out, and you could choose a different place that has childcare benefits, and a lot of organizations have pushed for those recently.
And I think people have to advocate for themselves too. There has been, like, we do live in a privileged environment. And I would say it goes over into even entitlement. And we had, unfortunately, during the pandemic, those who were essential, who were doing R&D and manufacturing, and then those who work from home, there became a great divide. Why do you want me to come back? I've got a child under 5. How can you ask me to come back? Well, you know what? Business continuity on site staff, they've got kids under 5 too. So this, advocate for yourself. So it's hard for me to come in. I understand that you're saying that I'm essential. It's hard for me to come in because my child cannot be going to school and I literally do not have care for them. Can I job share with someone else and I can do all the parts of our job that can be done from home, and they, because they can go on site, can do the parts of our job that need to be on site? Like, can we think about, like, I feel like we tend to get in this thing like people are not meeting every single goddamn need I have. What's going on? Whereas we have to advocate for ourselves and say we need to do this. And I'm right there with you that, unfortunately, women and people of color have been adversely and exponentially more impacted by the caretaking during the pandemic. And we have to acknowledge that. And frankly, if you manage people, you have to be having these conversations. This is Mental Health Month. Are you okay? Are your home responsibilities, do you feel okay with them? So I feel like we have to, I'm hearing what you're saying about these people, and I just want us all to, the companies have responsibilities, but so do we as individuals and we as managers and leaders.
Yeah, great points. Yep, in the back.
Yeah, I have a question for Erin at Google. I'm just curious, what do you think the percentage is of software engineers that are 100% remote? So it's a two-part thing. So that's one question.
Yeah.
And then what are you doing to engage those people other than like employee resource groups and affinity groups and whatnot? What are you doing just for the masses of remote software engineers?
Yeah, so breakdown of software engineers. I'm gonna have to do some little guesstimate, right? So we had about, of our 166-ish thousand, we had about 15 or so go full-time remote. Of that,
15,000?
15 go full-time.
Okay.
Yeah,
50,
15, 1-5.
15, okay.
Yeah. So the majority of folks are of our population is SWE, so I'd probably say a good chunk of that is just, I don't have the SWE number, so I'm just trying to product manager my way down to a number. it's interesting because the greater demand did not come from engineering per se, it more so came from places like sales and people operations. I found that like more engineers understood the collaboration value versus, I give this is a very easy example, but the sourcer who just needs to be in technology tools looking for the next candidate for a role. They're sourcing for a role.
Right.
No, that doesn't necessarily need to be done in a location, but I found more engineers, and I support tech specifically. So I did find that more engineers, like it wasn't, the floodgates didn't open at all. The floodgates did not, people did not pour forth from the engineering functions. So I don't have a specific number for you.
Okay.
Tell me part two of your question again.
Yes, what are you doing to engage them other than employee resource group and affinity groups? Given that particular sector of your population is probably
Yeah.
the ones that are most likely to leave.
Yeah. Definitely trying to offer. Let's try to parse this out. So, the folks that have decided to likely not come into the office every day are looking for some form of flexibility. So there's a whole bunch of flexibility options. Things like work from anywhere weeks. So for 4 weeks out of the year, at any point in time, you can just work from anywhere. So there's still that kind of flexibility there. What I expect to happen is I expect there to be a lot more grand events. We're gonna have design thinking for 3 days and a party on the 4th day. Like I expect more events. We have not gotten there, right? We have not had well, we're just coming back to the office to begin with. So some of the things have already been a little grand, but they've been like generalized grand, like come to this campus and the whole campus is having a party. Which for those folks who are remote, like that's not necessarily the draw. What I expect to see is more concentrated efforts to bring folks in for specific, with intention. So not for the sake of just like, let's just go grab a beer, but like, we're gonna solve a problem and then we're gonna build rapport. Like we're going to build connections. We're going to find that sense of belongingness. I expect there to be a little bit more duality in some of those events where I think in previous times it was just like, we're just gonna have fun. Like we're just gonna throw an X. Like now I expect it to be a lot more. We're gonna like truly solve a problem, do some get into the things. We're gonna have that technical discourse. We're gonna have disagreements. We're gonna fight through it, and then we're also going to connect. So I
Like a
expect
hackathon or something like that, maybe.
yeah, exactly. Again, hasn't happened because we just got started, but that's what where I would predict if I had a crystal ball.
Thank you.
In my previous place, it was a tech company, a medium-sized tech company, and all the conversations were around quarterly shebangs, essentially. Quarterly come together, plan and party. I don't know if the party sector of that has happened, but it's really about these momentous. If you're doing planning quarterly, then you should come together quarterly and spend some significant time together as an organization, but with your teams as well, and have a goal in mind. If it's planning, it's great. That's great. If it's like product design, that's great. Whatever it is, again, intentionality. And people really do, I would say, in these uncertain times, people do thrive in some sort of structure or knowing that something is coming. And like knowing that, they're part of a greater process is actually very comforting to people because everything else is so uncertain.
And I'll say our significant growth has been in informatics. We acquired a company out of New York that is learning how to discover proteins like digitally, molecular proteins digitally. So typically with this science, you can a molecule, you can go very deep on one molecule. We think this molecule, we know exactly what it can do for brain cancer, or you can go broad but shallow. Here's what we think you can do for breast, lung, brain, et cetera. Basically digital discovery, informatics, machine learning, and AI. When it comes to molecular discovery, you can go deep and broad. So we've really doubled down on that. And so for those groups, there are coming, basically anybody who has chosen to be full-time remote, we will fly you back to campus and put you up every 2 months. And so the groups are figuring out those exactly whether it's a hackathon or what they're trying to do on that cadence. The other thing we feel really strongly about is giving back. So June 13th is Gives Back Week. So Genentech Gives Back Week every year. It used to culminate with a concert in Oral Park. Haven't done that in a while, but there's the children's walk. There's all sorts of, so we basically, it's a week where you as teams are encouraged to volunteer together. So we're gonna go work at the food bank, we're gonna go work at Family House, we're gonna go clean up the seashore. We are going, so that you are getting together and connecting as a team while you are helping the broader community. And that is part of our ethos, and that's actually, we're getting some really, like, this is our first Gives Back Week that we're actually be able to do more things in person. And the chatter around is really excited.
Yeah, that's awesome. Quick one over here.
Yes, so I kind of, in my notes app, had this question and I reframed it so many times, so I hope this makes sense. But I work in consulting, so consulting is a pretty social career, as is I think a lot of different careers represented here. How do you build a brand remotely while remaining authentic in your personal choices? So for example, if you still want to stay remote, which I've heard different stories from each of you about, like having that, giving people that choice, but how do you build your brand when especially you're in a very social career where people kind of really value that face-to-face time, conversations by the water cooler are brought up in promotion conversations? How do you kind of maintain and build that brand?
I would say you have to go with what is uniquely you and authentically you. So I was telling Suzanne, I have a group called Women Who Love Beer. Because when I was consulting and doing business development, I would go to, and this is, maybe unique to my industry, I would go to women-based events because I really liked networking with other women. But the programs were always finding your inner voice or work-life balance. And I was like, where are the programs for those of us who have no problem finding our voice and who just want to crush it? And so my friend who was in marketing at the company I worked for, she was like, create your own thing. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, create your own event. She's like, what do you like to do? I'm like, well, I like to go to baseball games. I like beer. She's like, there you go. Women who love beer, do your own thing. So granted, beer, getting together over beer is an in-person thing, but you can have something that's virtual that is unique to you. Let's say you're really into an author or you're like, I think if you find something that speaks to you and who you are, and that's probably a commonality with some of your connections already, build on that. Because virtual or in person, it's really the commonality, it's those threads that, kind of tie us together, so.
I'm not even touching that. That's fantastic. Like, what am I about to go make tomorrow? That's yes.
When I was in consulting, the firm I worked for put on like a women's networking event. And it was something like flower arranging.
Oh,
And one of the heads of HR was one of my clients. She called me up and she goes, did you know they did this? And I said, no. And she goes, well, can you talk to whoever did that and tell them to stop? Like, what are you thinking?
So two things, one comment is more of like a call to action. So I went to my first women conference last week, first time participating, and I will say it's so important that men attend those type of events, and it's not just a female-based only conversation. And so I would encourage any man here to participate in any type of industrial or industry experience you can have supporting that part of our workforce. My question is, and this is something that I've been thinking about, I will preface it that I agree. I think it's really important to be in the office, and I've been in the office through COVID, so I haven't been someone working remotely. And I don't necessarily have this benefit, but for the employees that want to be remote, we talked earlier about compensation. And I think the difficult part about that is unless that employee relocates and now is reporting out of a different territory that has a different cost model, you're potentially still benefiting the same amount to that employee. So everyone here is generating revenue. If you're generating the same amount of revenue, how do you combat that, or how do you? I'm looking at you, Aaron, but
Yeah.
anyone can answer this.
I'm not
like-
touching it.
How do you navigate that? Because you're essentially could be saying, well, we're gonna pay you less, but we're gonna benefit from you just the same amount. So that's a
okay.
really difficult.
Okay,
thing to
okay.
navigate.
Same value.
Yeah, you did hit that. Okay, thank you for clarifying, Stan. I was like, wait, tax fraud? No, I get it. So not that they're reporting that they're working, so not, I'm saying I'm in the Bay Area and I report, and I actually am in North Carolina, but like I am in North Carolina, but I'm giving you the same product. Yeah, so, stuff and Josh.
I'm happy to.
Oh, whoa. I'll just sit over here and let Josh take this one.
So for the vast majority of jobs, it's hard to quantify what your sort of financial contribution to a company is. If you are a salesperson, you might have a sales quota and you are given an incentive based on that. But your salary is based on the market rate for your job. And every job exists within a local labor market, and the cost of that labor can differ based on the market. So some companies have taken the point of view that, comp should always reflect whatever the local cost of labor is. And that's sort of like the traditional way of doing it. Like, like I've been doing comp for my whole career. And like, that's what I grew up learning. And so that's what I just assume is like normal. But what some companies have now started doing, and it's hard to get a handle on what percentage exactly are doing this. I would probably put it at anywhere between like 15 and 25%, have just decided they're going to pay the same everywhere. It might be San Francisco everywhere. If the company is located in Denver, it might be Denver everywhere. But they've just decided, okay, like everything's the same. The result of that is you have costs of labor that are starting to converge. So where somewhere like Austin used to be like 80 or 85% of what the Bay Area pays, between the companies are now paying Bay Area everywhere and companies having to compete with companies that are paying Bay Area everywhere, that 80 or 85% is now 90%. Like Miami all of a sudden is paying like 90% of Bay Area. Now we'll see what like crypto just implodes this month. Like,
Did that happen today?
yeah, I mean, like every day it's like, so that 90% may go back to something else. So the point though is all of this is just driven by what's happening in the local market, as opposed to some like, we can drill down and figure out that like, okay, you're generating, 50 widgets for us, therefore we're going to pay you the same, like regardless of where you are. And that's like how companies, HR departments tend to think about it.
Yeah, no, I think that it makes sense if you're tied to that local area to kind of recalibrate. But if let's say you're a Bay Area employee, but you have the opportunity to be remote, but you're still reporting into the Bay Area, depending on what your revenue business model is. If you have a customer, you're client facing, you're still charging that employee based on the rate of the Bay Area. So I think that's the difficult one to kind of work through.
Aaron talked about something though, that like, if we compensate, if all companies like Airbnb, like you can live anywhere in the world, it's super interesting, believe it. For Genentech is a US based entity. So you can't, like I have an employee who is from Vancouver and her parents are older. And so the minute the shelter in place order went, she was on a plane to Vancouver because in case something happened, she wanted to make sure she was there. Awesome. And like, I don't know, 3-6 months later, something, the HR person on my team was like, well, you guys know, nobody can work out of the country. I was like, really, why? And she, basically you can't generate taxable income. And so I had to call this person back, which felt really horrible. But Aaron was saying something like, let's say you continue to pay Bay Area salaries, that's contributing to places like, there's places in Idaho
Oh my God. Boise
that
is
the
not-
locals can't afford to live there anymore. So you are upending economies. It's an unintended consequence. So I'm not saying that's the right thing or the wrong thing, I'm just saying it's a thing. For what it's worth, that I had not really thought about that.
And to be fair, I also want to win in this market, but I also recognize like it's extra disrespectful if there's like people who have lived in a market, they have worked for that market and they've earned to work to live the life that they've been working towards, and then here I come like I'm gonna offer 2x over asking.
This is what everybody hates Californians.
Yeah.
And all the surrounding.
How are we doing on time? One more question. We have one over here. Uh-oh.
It's so patient.
Oh, no. Oh, she's her. Okay, I'm sorry.
So I think this would be targeted probably for Sarah and Aaron. So are either of your organizations considering reducing your real estate footprint in response to decreased demand for in-office work? And it would also create cost savings.
Are you my CFO? What's the deal? This has been a question that has been on my mind for a year. And I was telling Aaron, actually, when I was thinking about this, when people come back, they're not coming back full time. So they're gonna come back in some sort of reduced, we were gonna have reduced demand on our real estate. But as we were creating our future working agreements, I had this great idea. I'm like, okay, since my team's doing it, let's figure out how we can have roughly the same amount of people here every day. So instead of having 11,000 people here every day, we have 7,000, but we have 7,000 Monday through Friday. That'd be perfect, right? And people in culture laughed at me. They're like, we can't do that. People are gonna come back when they gotta come back. So basically we have the peak, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So we are transporting, feeding, and housing peak demand. It's highly inefficient. But you know what? We have also acknowledged that we are going to be inefficient. I'm part of a group called Corporate Real Estate Networking, and we're developing a couple programs about for those who have hybrid workforces in your office environment, how do you share? Because many people don't know how to share in the office environment, because in order to reduce your footprint, you have to share. You can't be one-to-one assigned. And then step two is once you are figured out how you're going to share, how do you right size your footprint? And that's a different model. I can talk about this for a while because it's been on my mind. It's a different model if I have a leased solution. So Splunk is primarily leased, and they've closed, they've gotten out of all their smaller leases and are going with like an aggregator of co-working space for all their smaller offices. Now, the risk to them is if they have growth in one market, they're not going to be quickly able to accommodate that. I own 80% of my portfolio, and we've been getting out of leases and getting out of leases. I no longer have that wiggle room. So, and we're owned by Roche, which is European. So I might be looking 10 years in the future. CEO of Roche is looking 100 years in the future. So I had this great idea. I'm like, great, as I right size my footprint, I'm going to take all this real estate that I own and I'll land lease it to a developer, generate income off of that land to reduce the cost of running the site. This is a brilliant move. And the CEO was like, Roche was like, no, it's not, because I want flexibility. I want, not only do I not want you to land lease and generate income, I want you to buy those 3 parcels of land that within our giant 200+ acre footprint we don't own. So right sizing the footprint is really, I think, completely dependent on your modus operandi as a company. If you're US based or looking at a 10-year cycle, you're going to want to right size that, which means selling or lease or, getting out of leases. Apparently I'm buying land. So that's what I'm doing right now. So, but because we do have so much place-based work, we are doubling down on place-based. So I will likely be converting wherever I can, office to lab. I will be investing the capital in place-based work, and I will be watching what the office people are doing and figuring out what I need to do for them. But And I guess I'll be storing Christmas decorations, so I'll have space.
Fantastic.
Oh, well, there, a new idea is we're gonna turn one of our warehouses as doggy daycare. That came up today at lunch. Now, in-person lunch, we're talking, what do we do on the real estate? Let's do a doggy daycare.
I like it. Plenty of dogs in the Bay Area. So I don't think you'd have a problem.
We all miss our dogs here today, so.
Google's been a little tight-lipped on this, to be honest. If I, again, crystal ball, nothing's published. I haven't seen us pull back.
No. Google's like gobbling up real estate in New York, and they took down like half of Manhattan.
Yeah, I have, like, and again, it's obviously public record, like, I haven't
Yeah.
seen us.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good, you're good. I haven't seen us pull back, and then the little bit I've seen, I'm like, oh, this office is opening, oh, this office, okay, like, so look at all these options. It's interesting, I think they're trying to accommodate for the hybrid and that, like, different people will be in different places at different times, so like, they're trying to space it out so that essentially a whole bunch of different places could be utilized at different times versus all of them at all times, so.
And we're all accepting a lot of inefficiency in the
Yes.
near term.
Exactly, 100% yes.
It's all, I mean, it's also, it's like, it's like a complex math problem too. 'Cause I forget what the stat was with Google, but Google added some insane number of employees during COVID.
Wild.
And during COVID, actually stopped acquiring real estate. So you actually wound up with like a shortage of seats.
Mhm.
But then you say, okay, well, now not everyone's gonna be in the office every day. So like maybe like we are right sized just by being hybrid, like you sort of like naturally do it. So yeah, this is a tricky one. I do not envy those who have to figure it out.
For anybody we didn't get a question answered, we're gonna be here, so.
Yeah, we've got the space until 9
I mean, yeah, we
or
go
whenever.
until 9, even later than that.
Yeah.
All good.
Party.
Yeah, so, yeah, we could keep going. This has been a great conversation. Thank you all
Thank
so
you.
much for
You're
being here.
excellent at this, by the way.
Thank
Our
you.
panel and John.
Help yourself and you can continue the bingo. We'll hand out some prizes. Thank you all so much for
Thank you.
coming and thanks to our panelists.
Thank you.
I'm going to see if this transferred to a Zoom recording. I'll send it out. We'll post it on the Alumni Association YouTube if you can hear it. So.